Thank you for joining us. Whew, that was a busy one, right? I'm Melissa Francis in for Harris Faulkner. The daily briefing starts right now.
Fox News Alert, we are waiting for the White House briefing to begin about 30 minutes from now as President Trump's legal team goes on the offensive. Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, and this is the Daily Briefing. A couple big headlines. The president's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, answers the $130,000 question on Stormy Daniels and lays out parameters for any potential interview with Robert Mueller. We have this covered from all angles. Former DOJ prosecutor Rohan Virginkar is standing by with legal analysis, and Terry Holt and Leslie Marshall will look at the political implications. But we begin with Chief White House Correspondent John Roberts. He's live on the North Lawn of the White House. John.
Boy, and what a storm of controversy Rudy Giuliani created last night when he said on Hannity that the president had reimbursed Michael Cohen for that $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels as part of the non-disclosure agreement. But Rudy Giuliani casting that payment as a retainer for services rendered and expenses incurred on Michael Cohen's behalf, that the president was not reimbursing him for paying off Stormy Daniels, merely reimbursing Michael Cohen for expenses that he said he had. At the heart of this case is the potential for an FEC violation, according to Rudy Giuliani. That's what Giuliani believes the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York is pursuing, and that the fact that the president reimbursed Cohen for that payment to Stormy Daniels takes that off the table. Listen to what he said.
He was definitely reimbursed. There's no doubt about it.
So why did he say he wasn't?
Maybe. First of all, if we had to defend this as not being a campaign contribution, I think we could do that. This was for personal reasons. This was the president had been hurt personally, not politically, personally so much, and the First Lady by some of the false allegations. That one more false allegation, 6 years old. I think he was trying to help the family.
Giuliani insisted this morning that this had nothing to do with the Trump campaign, nothing to do with protecting President Trump as a client. It had everything to do with protecting him as a person. But then Giuliani said this. Listen here.
Imagine if that came out on October 15th, 2016, in the middle of the last debate with Hillary Clinton.
So to make it go away, they made this
Cohen
payment.
didn't even ask. Cohen made it go away. He did his job.
Stormy Daniels' attorney, Michael Avenatti, who you see there pictured on the right of Stormy Daniels, is spinning this as big trouble for the president.
I think our case just got exponentially better in the last 24 hours. I mean, we knew we were going to be able to prove this. It's not about what happened in 2006 or 2007. I've been saying this all along. This is about a cover-up. It's about lies told the American people. It's about people trying to pull the wool over people's eyes, that citizens of this country.
But a potential gray area here, even if you are to believe the tale that President Trump reimbursed Cohen for expenses incurred because Cohen took out a loan on his home equity line of credit, the initial $130,000. That may be deemed as a loan to the campaign, which was then repaid, which could put it in some sort of legal area that would not be favorable to the president. A report also this hour from NBC News that Michael Cohen's phones and his email, or rather his text messages, were tapped by the FBI in the week leading up to the raid on his house, and that possibly a phone call from the White House was intercepted. That really got Rudy Giuliani's back up, telling Robert Costa of the Washington Post that that would make a mockery out of attorney-client privilege. A source also told me that if the president's phone call with his attorney was wiretapped by the FBI, that would be some serious problem, I don't want to say exactly what he said because I can't say it on TV.
I don't think, I was going to say, we don't want to have to bleep you.
It would raise a lot of issues, let's put it that way.
Okay.
Dana?
All right, John.
Hey, one other thing,
Okay.
Dana. The way that this all went down last night, where the White House, where the president and Jay Sekulow and Rudy Giuliani agreed on this and didn't tell anybody, even the White House counsel at the White House, morale is just, it's in the dumps here right now. A lot of people walking around saying, what are we doing here? So it's had some effect, at least here at 1600 Pennsylvania.
Well, it's going to make the White House briefing that's set to start in 26 minutes from now very interesting. So we'll catch you there and watch your question. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you.
More now on the big legal picture with former Justice Department prosecutor Rohan Virjankar. I'm glad that you're here today. Well, actually mentioned you're a partner at Foley and Lardner there in D.C. You have a lot of experience at the Justice Department and in your private practice. If I could just maybe get your first take on this news from NBC that there was possibly the FBI had obtained a permit to listen and look at listen to phone calls and look at emails of Michael Cohen. Tell me about what is the stringency of the process in order to get that approved, and would somebody like Rod Rosenstein have had to approve that? And if you would, Rohan, is this separate, this Michael Cohen issue and Stormy Daniels, separate from the Mueller investigation?
Thanks, Dana. So starting with your last question, I think based on the facts that we've seen that have come out, it does seem like the Stormy Daniels investigation is separate and apart from everything that the special counsel is looking into. And as a result of that, I think when the prosecutors there in that case, which seems to be the Southern District of New York, applied for a Title III wiretap here, they would have had to meet a pretty high standard. In all cases where you do have a wiretap of a subject of an investigation, it's a pretty high standard. But given the profile of the people involved here, the fact that it's an attorney, let alone the president's attorney, it all creates a pretty high burden that I'm sure the prosecutors would want to meet. And then remember that on top of all of that, these are only signed off after a federal judge takes a look at the application and approves it.
I think that Rudy Giuliani has a lot to say about that in terms of attorney-client privilege and Michael Cohen. Listen to what he said about that particular aspect of the Mueller probe.
Before they raided a lawyer's office, which will turn out to be an outrageous violation of the attorney-client privilege, before they put out the questions and completely soil the atmosphere, the chances were pretty good. Now we're going to have some convincing to do.
Rohan, I do think that because these stories are coming so fast, that there's a lot of conflating here. It's the Mueller investigation is not the one that called for the raid on Michael Cohen's office. That was the Southern District of New York, as you said. And also the questions that were released this week, they weren't necessarily from the Mueller team. Apparently, the Washington Post reports that Jay Sekulow took the range of topics that Mueller's team said they wanted to ask about, and he drafted questions much like you would if you were getting somebody prepared for a press interview. Let me ask you about this question regarding the payments and the financial issue regarding campaign violations. I mean, in many cases, as I understand it, these would be considered misdemeanors. Is that right?
That's right.
And so when you get to this issue of was it a campaign finance violation, and if it wasn't, did the president sign off on a faulty or a false financial report to the FEC, at the end of the day, would a jury look at this and say, wow, we've got a real problem here, or do you expect this to sort of be like the least bad news for the Trump team this week?
Well, I think a federal criminal charge, whether it's a misdemeanor or a felony, is a pretty serious thing, and my experience is that juries take their jobs very seriously. The fact that it might be a misdemeanor is something that really only comes into play after you've been convicted and you're trying to figure out what kind of sentence you might be seeing. But in my experience, anytime somebody's charged with a federal crime of any kind, it's a very serious issue, and the courts and the juries do take that job very seriously.
Very seriously. I know they want me to wrap. I have one last question for you. We hear a lot of people say, and Rudy Giuliani said again this morning, that when it comes to Russian collusion, that there has been no evidence of that. And I have just a question, just from a DOJ standpoint, why would we actually have any of the evidence? So far, Mueller's team has actually been pretty leak-free. What evidence would we actually have known about?
I think the public is very unlikely to have a lot of evidence. Mueller's team is made up of some very experienced, very well-respected prosecutors, and all of them know that there's restrictions in place when you have a grand jury open and when you're dealing with classified national security information. So the likelihood of the public getting any information that they have from their investigation is very, very low.
All right. Rohan Virjankar, I'm glad you were here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now for the political implications, Terry Holt, founder and partner of HDMK, and Fox News contributor Leslie Marshall, syndicated radio talk show host. Okay, so we just got some sort of legal groundwork taken care of, and now we can talk about the politics. Terry, there's lots of different takes on the right, ranging from this is no big deal to this is great, you finally have the Trump team on the offensive.
I think that's exactly right. What Rudy Giuliani did with his interview last night was to go from being in a defensive posture where they were taking incoming and having to deal with the scrutiny of these lawsuits and turned it on its head. They flipped the script on the prosecutors and said, we're going to deal with this Stormy Daniels thing separate and apart. And to me, it's a shift in legal strategy that portends a shift in political strategy where now the president, the White House can be on offense and really can set this aside. And while we're chewing it over in the media, they can go back to doing the job that they were elected to do. And I think it does send the signal that Giuliani and the legal team are done playing defense and they're now going to play offense.
Leslie, I'm sure that the Democrats are looking at this from a different perspective and love to get your take on it.
We're looking at it from a very different perspective. Although there are some core Trump voters who don't care if he lied about this, if there was an affair, if there was a payout, and they will probably, wholeheartedly vote for the president again. There are others that are getting tired of, and you can see it in the polls, not just the lies, but the disarray and the chaos that is coming out of the White House. I think what Rudy Giuliani did actually is he made it easier for Michael Cohen and harder for his client, the president, and I think a lot of people, many legal experts were very perplexed by that. We Democrats on the left are looking at this helping what we're hoping to have a blue wave or a blue tsunami, if you will, in November in the midterm election, because the president is a Republican and he is linked to the Republican Party, and there is a question of trust. We just heard that morale is low in the White House. I think morale is low for some of those people that voted for Trump and are not so sure about him and his administration going forward.
Well, we're going to talk about the midterms later in this hour with Karl Rove. While I have you, I'm not going to play this soundbite because I don't have enough time, but Terry, what do you think of this? Rudy Giuliani last night was talking about Ivanka, the president's daughter, and defending her, and when they were asked, what about the son-in-law, he said, Jared is a fine man, but men are disposable, but a fine woman like Ivanka, come on. Some people are maybe trying to read too much into this, but what did you think of that?
I think it sounds like a proud father who loves his daughter and would take any opportunity he could to give her a nice plug, and that's exactly what I read into that comment.
All right, well, stick around. Terry Holt and Leslie Marshall will want to bring you back after the briefing is happening in just a few minutes.
All right.
And there are reports that 3 Americans held hostage in North Korea could soon be released. We'll have the latest on that. Closer to a summit between President Trump and Kim Jong-un, there are reports that the 3 Americans detained in North Korea could soon be freed. Meanwhile, South Korean officials expressing optimism that the summit will provide a complete solution to the North Korean nuclear issue. I'm joined now by the New York Times bestselling author of Us versus Them, Ian Bremmer, also the president and founder of Eurasia Group. Congratulations on that landing on the list.
Thank you.
Your book came out at a really good time. And before I get to that part of it, let me ask you about North Korea. If these hostages do get released, that's an incredible outcome leading into this summit.
Another big win. Right? I mean, Trump did offer something. He offered a summit, which is a big deal. It legitimizes Kim Jong-un. The North Koreans want that. But in return, North Koreans have suspended not just nuclear tests, but more importantly, ICBM tests, which they didn't have to do. Trump himself had said, red line, can't have missiles that hit the lower 48. Well, this is, definitely moving in the right direction before the meeting, before Trump and Kim are together. And I think if they actually let go these political prisoners, which is obviously an enormous sticking point, this place is kind of run like a concentration camp. There is no rule of law. There is no judiciary. That shows that the North Koreans are taking this very seriously.
What might we learn from these hostages if they are released from this labor camp? What might be able to glean from that?
I mean, massive mistreatment I mean, they've been kept out of communication. I'm sure. I mean, I'd be surprised if they were tortured. But having said that, I mean, you know, there's going to be enormous amounts of interrogation and getting them self-incriminated. Just the kind of things. I mean, there is no human rights for these people when they go over.
Last week, you had a tweet that you put out. You said, Trump, Xi, Moon, and Kim together get my vote for the Nobel Peace Prize. Trump deserves full credit. And I think afterwards you said you hadn't ever seen as much backlash on a tweet as you had from that. But I think that if it were to happen, that we find peace in North Korea, of course they should be the nominees for the prize.
The funny thing is that the backlash to me was all about Trump. Like, how could you say Trump? They weren't saying, how could you say Kim Jong-un should get the prize?
That was my part that I circled.
He's a little worse, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, even if you can't stand Trump, and there are a lot of people that can't stand Trump, it's pretty clear, right? So, I mean, we have this major problem in the United States that even if someone like me, who's pretty critical of Trump's foreign policy, I call him like I see him, and more often than not, I think Trump's gotten it wrong on foreign policy. But if I say he gets anything right, and in North Korea, it's not just bumbling into it. The Trump administration has actually put much more pressure on the Chinese to squeeze for sanctions. They put much more pressure on the North Koreans to realize they need to engage, more pressure on the South Koreans to realize they have to do something. And ultimately, that's moved the needle in a way that Obama and Bush were unable to. And I say that, and people aren't prepared to handle it.
So when you talk about in your book, us versus them, is that a part of that, which is a feeling that, like, he can't get, even if he does something great, he can't get any credit for it?
We have gone to the point where literally a breaking half tweet this morning, a half tweet with ... not even finished yet, is breaking news that's what we have to cover. That actually happened to me on the news this morning. It's not. And if we think Trump's going to be gone in 4 years, in 8 years' time, and there's a presumption among those that can't stand him that that's going to fix the problems. But where actually the reason that Trump was elected president is, and you went completely outside the established norms of what a Democrat or Republican president would be, is because people, average people in the United States, like everyone I grew up with in the projects, feel like this country and the establishment no longer serves them. And that is true economically, it's true culturally, it's true in terms of our military, it's true in terms of technology. Those are deep, deep-seated things that are just not getting fixed. And we're not unique. It's the way they feel in Britain, it's the way they feel in Canada and in New Zealand, it's the way they feel across the continental EU. It's only in Japan they don't feel this way because no immigrants, population shrinking, no military with fights all over the world. Like, they're the one country that has rejected globalism, and so no one's complaining.
Well, in a minute that I have left with you, let me ask you then about another area, which is that we have President Trump's delegation on its way to China. They're there to discuss the tariffs issue and trying to work on the trade imbalance. Do you think that that is a place where the president is well positioned to get a good deal for the United States?
Much harder, right? I mean, first of all, it's a big delegation. They are not aligned, right? So they don't all agree that they want the same thing. That makes it much harder to get a deal done with the Chinese. I don't think we actually want a trade war with China, but on the technology piece, we're hitting them hard. And we're hitting them hard on an issue that Xi Jinping has made the dominant strategic issue for his presidency. They want to be the dominant technology power by 2025. We don't want that.
No.
This is going to create a fight, and I don't see us backing off that much. So even though I don't think there's going to be a trade war in terms of tariffs going down the pike, there'll be a little bit, I think that we are heading towards more confrontation with the Chinese. Hard for Trump to avoid that.
But for us to do something smart on technology.
Let's see if it would be more smart if we were doing it with our allies. The fact that the Europeans are not with us right now, I think, is a serious, serious problem for Trump foreign policy.
All right, well, maybe they'll listen to you and see what they're doing. All right, Us versus Them. Ian Bremmer is the author of that, the subtitle there, The Failure of Globalism. Thanks, Ian Bremmer.
Thanks, Dana Perino.
The White House briefing just minutes away on a busy news day. You'll want to stick around for that. Plus, the most expensive campaign in the country now getting nasty as Indiana Republicans fight for the chance to unseat Democratic Senator Joe Donnelly. Stores on U.S. military bases worldwide to ban phones made by 2 Chinese companies. U.S. intelligence warning that China could be using the devices to spy on the military. The devices are made by Huawei and ZTE. Officials telling Fox News the Pentagon recently terminated the use of BlackBerries and only uses iPhones, which are also assembled in China. Indiana Senate race is getting red hot in final days of the primary campaign. Two sitting congressmen and a former state lawmaker fighting for the Republican nomination. The winner will face Democratic Senator Joe Donnelly in the battle to flip that seat from blue to red. Mike Tobin is live in Indianapolis. How important is this race, Mike?
Well, Dana, this race has the attention of the White House, and whoever wins will ultimately get some personal attention from President Trump. This race pits Republican Congressman Todd Rokita against Republican Congressman Luke Messer, and a late ad is businessman Mike Braun. He campaigns as a political outsider, even though he served as a state legislator. Whoever wins goes against the incumbent, Democrat Joe Donnelly. A White House official told Fox News that Senator Donnelly is targeted as a red state obstructionist, and seeing him as vulnerable, the president will throw the weight of the White House into this race.
The political wing of the White House is, I think, looking at this as the most important race in the country. And we started and still have 5 blue seats that were in play.
And the campaign just made it official a short time ago. The president and Vice President Mike Pence will show up in South Bend, Indiana to campaign 2 days after this primary. Dana?
Oh, I bet they're on pins and needles waiting for a tweet. Mike, this primary in Indiana has been particularly nasty so far, hasn't it?
Nasty and expensive. The airwaves are filled with jabs at each other's voting records, personal and petty insults. Democrats are looking at this race, suggesting the Republicans are doing their opposition research for them. Watchers have said they have taken a right-leaning state and turned it into a toss-up. However, each of the candidates defends his position.
I am not waiting till October so that Donnelly can stick a fork in one of my 2 opponents. We've got to get this information out now, and that's what a primary is about.
We're going to win this race. We're going to win this primary, and when we do, we'll bring together all the Republicans to make sure we take the case to Joe Donnelly this fall.
Now, the president won Indiana by 19 points in 2016. Therefore, each of these candidates is branding himself as most like Trump and best suited to support the president's agenda. Dana?
All right, Mike Tobin, thank you. America's dairy farmers asking the government for help as their profits plummet. More than 50 groups across the country banding together, asking Congress to establish a minimum price for milk production and to purchase any surpluses. This comes as numerous farms have shut down in recent years. In Wisconsin alone, 500 dairy farms closed in 2017. 150 stopped milking this year, and there are now 7,600 herds, down 20% from 5 years ago. Live to the White House, where we are awaiting the briefing with Sarah Sanders as the deadline on the Iran nuclear deal looms, with Tehran making it clear they won't renegotiate anything. How might the White House respond? Stick around. Live at the State Department with an update from there. Jillian.
That's right, Dana. Kim Jong-un has long been using American hostages as bargaining chips or leverage in his dealings with the international community. But according to the Trump administration, 3 of those may soon be getting released. President Trump tweeting last night, as everybody is aware, the past administration has long been asking for 3 hostages to be released from a North Korean labor camp, but to no avail. Stay tuned. And the president's brand new legal counsel, Rudy Giuliani, tells Fox News this morning that, quote, "We got Kim Jong-un impressed enough to be releasing 3 prisoners today," though the White House began backtracking on those comments just a few hours after he made them. A senior administration official told Fox News Giuliani may have gotten ahead of the curve, and there's still work to do to get the hostages released. The 3 in question are Korean Americans. 1 has been detained since October of 2015, and the other 2 since 2017. A few weeks ago, all 3 were reportedly relocated from a labor camp to a hotel near Pyongyang ahead of the Trump-Kim summit. Mike Pompeo and Kim Jong-un did discuss the North's detention of American hostages when they met in Pyongyang over Easter weekend. That meeting was intended to lay the groundwork for a potential Trump-Kim summit this spring, and preparations are now in full swing over at the White House as well. A statement from Vice President Pence's office reads in part, quote, "The Vice President is delaying his trip to Brazil in order to ensure all diplomatic and national security resources are available as President Trump prepares for his historic talks with the Kim regime." Now, Dana, as you mentioned, the State Department briefing will get underway over here shortly, and we'll have more for you coming out of that.
All right, Jillian, thank you so much. And for more on this now with retired four-star General Jack Keane, chairman of the Institute for the Study of War and a Fox News senior strategic analyst. This must be fascinating for you to watch because just as in the long sweep of history, the changes happening here with North Korea and South Korea and the United States possibly all coming together to have a summit, that is happening at a rapid speed.
Yeah, that's actually the issue. It's a little over 90 days when he began the initiative of participating in the South Korean Olympics, and there's been one concession after another. It is the speed and the sense of urgency that Kim Jong-un is exercising that has created the drama, because it certainly was unexpected. If the opportunity presents itself and we are able to denuclearize, that's an open question to be sure, and the history is not good. But if that is the reality, we haven't seen a diplomatic achievement like this, I think, since the end of World War II when we did the Marshall Plan in Europe.
Oh, I hear that Sarah Sanders has just started the briefing. So, General, can you hang with me for a moment? We'll listen to Sarah Sanders now at the White House briefing.
To the 9 victims and their families of yesterday's military plane crash in Savannah, Georgia. The 9 members of the Puerto Rico National Guard, who had a combined 167 years of service, were on an official mission. The President has been briefed on the incident and will work with the Department of Defense to provide assistance and resources to the Puerto Rico National Guard. As you all know, President Trump's nominee to lead the CIA, Gina Haspel, is scheduled to appear before the Senate Intelligence Committee next week. In her 33 years at the agency, Acting Director Haspel has held senior positions around the globe, overseeing covert operations and counterterrorism efforts to protect the homeland. She's one of the most qualified, most capable individuals ever nominated to lead the CIA. We are seeing widespread support from across the political spectrum and within the intelligence community. People that worked at the CIA, people that led the CIA, support Acting Director Haspel. Jeremy Bash, the former Democratic Chief Counsel to the House Committee on Intelligence and Chief of Staff at the CIA under President Obama, called Acting Director Haspel the rare CIA director nominee that both parties should love. With planning and preparations underway for the summit with North Korea, and with Secretary Pompeo now engaged from the State Department, Republicans and Democrats should come together and confirm Gina Haspel as the director of the CIA. Today, we also mark World Press Freedom Day. This comes after a recent suicide bombing in Afghanistan, claiming the lives of at least 10 journalists. Many journalists around the globe do their jobs at great risk every day. The United States stands in solidarity with these men and women who work for free and open societies. And with that, I'll take your questions. Zeke.
Thanks, sir. First, just a quick question. I don't know if you saw the news out of Iran. Foreign Minister's video statement saying that Iran would not renegotiate or add on to the JCPOA. How does that influence the President's thinking? Do you have any response to that?
We don't have any announcements at this time. When the President has a final decision on what he will do in terms of the JCPOA, we'll let you know.
And secondly, on the other topic in the news today, could you explain why the President, when he answered questions to reporters a few weeks ago about the $130,000 payment from Michael Cohen to Stormy Daniels, why the President was not truthful with the American people and with the people he served?
As Mayor Giuliani stated, and I'll refer you back to his comments, this was information that the President didn't know at the time, but eventually learned. Jonathan?
Take a broader view on this. I know you can't talk about the details. But can I ask you, when the President so often says things that turn out not to be true, when the President and the White House show what appears to be a blatant disregard for the truth, how are the American people to trust or believe what is said here or what is said by the President?
We give the very best information that we have at the time. I do that every single day, and will continue to do that every day I'm in this position.
But the President, I mean, when the story first happened, it came out that Ty Cobb would be leaving and Emmett Flood would be coming in. The President said fake news, said it was not true. When he talked about the prisoners in North Korea, he said the previous administration had been failed to get them out. These two of them were taken prisoner while Donald Trump was president. And obviously the totally conflicting statements on the Stormy Daniels payment. These are statements that are just not true.
When it comes to North Korea, I think you could also look at Otto Warmbier, who was detained during a previous administration, as was one of the current detainees, and so that would reflect the president's comments that he made. When it comes to the last instance that you mentioned, as Mayor Giuliani stated, this wasn't something that was initially known, but later learned. And again, we give the best information possible at the time, and we're going to continue to do that every single day.
You started paying back Michael Cohen back in February of last year. I mean, the reimbursement was happening long before the president was asked about this.
Is that a question or?
But I'm saying, I mean, how would he not have known? He was paying him back.
Again, I'm not going to get into those details, and I would refer you back to the statements, pretty lengthy statements made by Giuliani both last night and this morning, as well as the president's tweets where they've both spoken about that. Jim?
Just to follow up on that, the president did talk about monthly retainers in his tweet, and then Rudy Giuliani said that the president only knew about this 10 days to 2 weeks ago. How can you only be aware of something 10 days to 2 weeks ago, but at the same time be in the process of paying monthly retainers that apparently covered this reimbursement to Michael Cohen?
Again, I can't get into the details of the ongoing litigation. I'd refer you back to the president's outside counsel.
I'll just follow up on it. You said on March 7th there was no knowledge of any payments from the president, and he's denied all of these allegations. Were you lying to us at the time, or were you in the dark?
The president has denied and continues to deny the underlying claim. And again, I've given the best information I had at the time, and I would refer you back to the comments that you yourself just mentioned a few minutes ago about the timeline from Mayor Giuliani.
That statement, Sarah, that statement was in reference to the reimbursement, the payment.
Again, I gave you the best information that I had, and the allegations, the president has denied and continues to deny the underlying claim.
Why can't you just answer yes or no whether you were in the dark? I think it's a fairly simple question whether you just
I think it's a
didn't have the
fairly simple
information
answer that I've given you actually several times now. I gave you the best information that I had, and I'm going to continue to do my best to do that every single day. Jeff?
Sarah, can you give us an update on the 3 Americans held in North Korea? Rudy Giuliani said that they were going to be released today. Is that true?
We can't confirm the validity of any of the reports currently out about their release, but we certainly would see this as a sign of goodwill if North Korea were to release the 3 Americans ahead of discussions between President Trump and Kim Jong-un.
In addition to being an attorney, Sarah, in addition to being an attorney for the president, does Mr. Giuliani, Mayor Giuliani, have a wider remit to talk about things like foreign policy?
Not that I'm aware of. Steve?
Yes, Sarah, I wanted to ask you about these reports citing U.S. intelligence that the Chinese have installed new missile platforms on disputed islands in the South China Sea, and they also appear to now be basing fighter jets there. Meanwhile, pilots are being warned that Chinese military personnel are pointing lasers at U.S. military aircraft in Djibouti in Africa, injuring American pilots. Does any of this cross a red line for the president, and how does the administration intend to respond?
Yeah, we're well aware of China's militarization of the South China Sea. We've raised concerns directly with the Chinese about this, and there will be near-term and long-term consequences, and we'll certainly keep you up to date. John?
Thanks a lot, Sarah. Were you caught off guard by Mayor Giuliani's comments on Fox News last night?
I'm not part of the legal team and wouldn't be part of those discussions.
So is the administration, is the president, is he pleased with the job that Mayor Giuliani is doing right now? It seems as if he's opened the president up to some sort of criminal liability as it relates to federal election campaign violations.
I haven't discussed that with the president. I wouldn't be part of those conversations.
So the president then is pleased with the job that Mr. Giuliani is doing?
Again, I haven't had that conversation with the president. That's an outside counsel and not something I would be a part of. Francesca?
Thank you, Sarah. When was the last time that the president talked to Michael Cohen? And is Michael Cohen still his attorney? And also, is the White House concerned, or is the president concerned, that any conversations he would have had with Michael Cohen would have been picked up by the wiretap that we learned about today?
Let me see if I can get all of those questions since there were quite a few altogether. I'm not sure when the last conversation took place. On the second part, I'm not aware of specific places where he's representing the president. And on the last one, I would refer you to the president's outside counsel about any concerns of wiretapping. That wouldn't be something that we would
clarify. When did you specifically know that the president repaid Mr. Cohen for the $130,000? You personally?
The first awareness I had was during the interview last night. Major.
Sarah, you said earlier that when you've given answers around this general topic, you gave us the best information you had at the time. Now it appears that your position is you're not going to comment because it's ongoing litigation. Have you been advised not to wade into this to protect yourself from any potential legal exposure by giving either false information or information that proves later not to be able to be withstood in court?
No, but I would always advise against giving false information. As a person of human decency, I do my best to give
Jonathan's question earlier, when you say before that you gave the best information you had at the time,
and I continue to do that today.
but it turns out not to be correct or accurate, are you then trying to limit the liability that you may encounter by not dealing with any of those questions now and pushing it all off because you say it's ongoing litigation?
Again, I'm giving the best information I have. Some information I am aware of and some I'm not. When I can answer, I will. But beyond that, I really don't have anything to add.
Let me ask you something that the mayor said last night, not related to the questions you've gotten so far. He said, he, meaning the president, fired Comey because Comey would not, among other things, say that he wasn't a target of the investigation. Is that the White House position now, explaining why James Comey was fired?
There are a number of reasons that James Comey was fired. The president's named several of them, but the bottom line is he doesn't have to justify his decision. The president has the authority to fire and hire, and I think every single day we've seen that he made the right decision in firing James Comey. Again, I think that there are a number of reasons that he was fired. Certainly, James Comey was fired for lying, leaking, and politicizing the FBI. And the president has been, I think, repeatedly, day after day, been proven to be exactly right in his decision to fire James Comey. Sorry, Major, I'm going to keep going.
This is a completely tainted investigation. Do you agree with that?
Can you?
He said it's a completely tainted investigation. Do you agree with that?
Shannon, go ahead.
Can you clear up this timeline a bit, back to Jim's question about when exactly did the president learn that the payments were going to Michael Cohen to cover the Stormy Daniels?
I would refer you back to Mayor Giuliani's comment, and for anything further, I'd refer you to
2 weeks. And did the president know that Mr. Giuliani would specifically be talking about these payments on Hannity last night? Was he aware of the time and the method?
I don't know. That's a question you'd have to ask the mayor.
Do you know?
Thank you very much. A follow-up to Jeff's question. Jay Sekulow and Rudy Giuliani have both commented publicly on the North Korean hostages. Are they involved in any way in efforts to secure their release?
Not that I'm aware of.
Why are they commenting on this?
That's a question you'd have to ask them. I don't speak for people on the outside. Christine.
Is the president concerned that his own Justice Department authorized a wiretap that may have gathered communications between him and his personal attorney, Michael Cohen?
Again, I'm not sure of the comments in that report or the claims in that report. That's something that you would have to talk with the Department of Justice and the president's outside counsel.
When he learned the reporting that Michael Cohen's phones were wiretapped several days before?
I haven't talked to him about that, and again, I can't verify the validity of that report.
Just going back to the payments question, how many payments did the president make to Michael Cohen after the election?
You'd have to ask the president's outside counsel.
But Sarah, you're standing there.
Sorry, Krista.
Before the president. Can I just ask you about Rudy Giuliani's comments? Rudy Giuliani said this morning, imagine if that came out on October 15th, 2016, in the middle of the last debate with Hillary Clinton, a reference to the payment. So does the White House now acknowledge that that payment was made with politics in mind?
Again, I'm not aware of the back and forth, and I would refer you to the president's outside counsel.
Sarah, yesterday the president threatened to get involved in the Justice Department if memos were not turned over in a timely manner to the House Intelligence Committee. What actions is the president considering taking, and what does a timely manner mean to the president? How soon does he want the unredacted version of the special counsel?
Probably yesterday. But in terms of what he might do, as the president likes to say, we'll see what happens. Olivia?
Thank you, Sarah. On the Haspel nomination, would you remind us what the president's position is regarding the potential use of interrogation tactics that meet international definitions of torture?
I'm not sure what those two things are you're trying to connect. I know that Acting Director Haspel has done everything appropriate under the law, and she's going to be a great CIA director, and we look forward to her being confirmed. John?
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. Question on Russia. This morning, the Financial Times reported that Alexei Kudrin, a former close associate of President Putin and a strong advocate of warmer relations with the United States, may well be rejoining his government. This raises another question. You've said that the president would have a summit with Mr. Putin sometime in the near future. Can you give us any clues when that'll be? Has anything been determined on a possible Trump-Putin summit?
Nothing has been finalized on that front. I think the next big summit, if you will, I'll borrow your word, that the president will engage in will likely be between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. Beyond that, I don't have any updates.
There'll be no meetings. It's likely that there's no meetings with President Putin before the Kim-Trump summit.
Not that I'm aware of. Certainly nothing is finalized at this point, but certainly the president would still be very much open to sitting down with leader of Russia. Emerald?
Thank you, Sarah. Following up on Sagar's question, in regards to those memos and the congressional oversight, Rosenstein is saying this is extortion. What is the White House response to him calling it extortion? And does the president support the Freedom Caucus's articles of impeachment for Rosenstein?
The president would like to see the request of Congress to DOJ met. I haven't had a conversation with them about the articles of impeachment. Cecilia.
You just said that James Comey was fired for lying and leaking anti-suicide. What did he lie about before he was fired, and what did he leak before he was fired?
There are a number of allegations. One in which he lied during congressional testimony, and has been continually, I think, had a number of contradictions since then, which I pointed out that the president said he has learned every day since firing Comey that it was the right thing to do, and certainly has been justified in doing so. But again, going back to the president, frankly, doesn't have to have a justification. He can hire and fire whoever he wants, and he made the decision to fire James Comey, and that's certainly a decision he stands by and one that he feels very justified in since. Julie?
Giuliani correct in saying that he was fired in part because he wouldn't tell the president that he wasn't part of the investigation?
I can't speak for Mayor Giuliani. I haven't talked to the president about that. Julie?
File a fraudulent personal financial disclosure last year when he filed a report that did not include a loan from Michael Cohen or any company affiliated with him. I mean, if there was no loan, then what would he have been reimbursing?
I don't know. You would have to talk to the president's outside counsel. Brian?
Thank you. Can you say why he was talking with Giuliani about the North Korean prisoners, given that he doesn't have a high-level clearance?
I'm not aware that they spoke about that, so I don't know.
Was he aware that Giuliani was going to be talking about them on TV during the negotiations?
Again, I'm not aware that they spoke about it, so I can't answer that. Brian?
A couple of quick questions. Does the president believe he's above the law? And does he prefer to sit down with Kim Jong-un?
I'll answer the first question. No. Go ahead.
Thank you. And then does he prefer to sit down with Kim Jong-un versus Bob Mueller?
I certainly think that the president feels like stopping a nuclear war and helping protect the safety and security of people across the globe would certainly be the #1 priority of the president of the United States, and certainly I would think would be the priority that most Americans would share and support the president doing. Take one last question. Lali?
Sarah.
Sorry, April.
Okay, Sarah, really fast. Can you, 2 questions. Can you, if you're not ready.
Sarah, I was looking for her. I thought he was over here. He's usually standing over there. You threw me off. I'll come to you next.
So, Sarah, at this point, can you tell us definitively if the president plans to answer any questions from Bob Mueller, and if not, what is now in place here at the White House to go through that process of a subpoena, a possible indictment, a possible grand jury?
Again, those are all questions you would need to refer to the outside counsel.
Okay, well, now, going to Rudy Giuliani. Did Rudy Giuliani do harm to the president today and last night in his conversations to Fox?
I don't believe so. Sorry, I'm going to take the last question like I promised to do.
Why didn't he talk to the White House press office about his impacting stellar statements about what was happening? Everyone's on
The White House press office wouldn't coordinate with the president's outside legal team on legal strategy.
Blindsided. You said yourself you were blindsided.
I actually didn't use that term.
Well, I said it, but you were blindsided from what you said.
Well, with all due respect, you actually don't know much about me in terms of what I feel and what I don't.
21 years to understand how this operates.
All right, I think we're good. Lali, go ahead.
Last week there was a meeting between the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping in China. How does the White House see the meeting between the two leaders, India and China, trying to improve the relationship? And did the President had a role in that?
We don't have an official policy, but certainly think it's always good when other world leaders are getting along, and certainly when we can cooperate, that's definitely a good thing. We have a great relationship with both countries and hope to continue to do so. Thanks, guys.
All right, that's Sarah Sanders finishing the White House briefing today. Let's bring in former White House Deputy Chief of Staff Karl Rove, and welcome back retired General Jack Keane and former DOJ prosecutor Rohan Virgin-Carr. Karl, let me just start with you. Sarah Sanders today having to answer questions basically from the White House press corps saying, wait, you didn't know about what Rudy Giuliani was going to say last night, and it turns out that the president did know about these payments. You have said that he didn't know, and she basically said, I give the best information I have at the time, and she did say that the first time she had learned about the information that was revealed last night by Rudy Giuliani was during the interview itself. Your thoughts?
Well, she earned her combat pay today, that's for certain, and we saw a couple of tricks that I know you know as a White House, former White House press secretary yourself. If you got a bad question, go to a friendly reporter, and if you want to get out of the whole interview, go to the guy from India. But, you know, she is in an untenable place. One of them structural and one of them driven by events. The structural disadvantage is that, look, the White House outside counsel is not part of the White House staff and has to speak with its own voice, and that voice should not be spoken through the White House press secretary, but there's got to be better coordination than we saw here. And second of all, she has the problem of she has been up there echoing what the president said on Air Force One, that he was not aware of the payment to Michael Cohen and had nothing to do with it, and that story is now, as we say, inoperative in Washington, D.C.
Rohan, let me ask you just quickly, because I believe I know the answer to this, and the answer is no, but she's under no legal concerns here, right? If she's given information.
Cheap shot. Yeah, that was a cheap shot question. Absolutely.
So I want to get it from the lawyer. Rohan, can you confirm that my legal instincts are correct?
It does seem that way. We're talking about past conduct here.
Okay, and then do you think that there's anything more to be known about, or any sort of type of coordination? You know, Karl said there could be more coordination from the president's outside counsel to the White House press office, some way perhaps that goes to the chief of staff to keep things clear, or White House counsel's office. Is there anything inappropriate about the White House press office talking to outside counsel?
I don't think so. I mean, that's entirely up to the discretion of counsel.
Well, while you're here, I want you to take a listen also to General Jack Keane, who joins me. He was here beforehand. This is not about Stormy Daniels, General, so I'm going to ask you something about a woman that we do want to talk about, and that is Gina Haspel. Sarah Sanders opened up the briefing talking about her. She is the president's nominee to be the new director of the CIA. Her hearing is next week. It is expected to be quite controversial, even though she has widespread support across multiple administrations, Republicans and Democrats, and yet what do you think that she's going to go through next week?
Well, frankly, she's going to go through some very tough questioning, to be sure. But I'll tell you, I'll underscore what you just said. I have spoken to many people here about her in the Central Intelligence Agency and those that work around it, like the United States military. Her support among her peers, her subordinate superiors, is absolutely universal. There is no negative comment about her. And so that is really quite remarkable. And she was executing a directive, and she was executing something that was found to be legal as she oversaw waterboarding taking place at a rendition site.
Karl, could it be actually that by the end of Gina Haspel's nomination process next week, that you might actually see something that happened like with Mike Pompeo? There was all this lead up, lots of controversy, and at the end, the president got his way. He got the nominee that he wanted, and actually, it seems to be working pretty well. Could that actually happen for him next week?
It could, and not only did he get the nominee in the case of Pompeo, but I think the general public reaction to all of that was to the president's benefit and to Pompeo's benefit, and particularly when he immediately hit the ground running. I think the same thing could be true about this nominee for the CIA. I think the American people are going to see a very accomplished public servant, a patriot, and the bipartisan support that she's going to have outside of the Congress is going to, I think, do well for the president and for her.
Well, let me just wrap this up then with going back to the news of the day, at least in the briefing room. Of course, we talked earlier in the show about the American hostages who are being held in North Korea. They are Korean Americans. They're likely to be released. Apparently, there's some more work to be done there, so we're going to continue to follow that story. But Rohan, I will go back to you and asking you about this question about Mayor Giuliani, Rudy Giuliani, now the president's lawyer, making pretty amazing news last night about this Stormy Daniels affair. I just want to reiterate, get one more time from you, your thoughts about how people are conflating the two issues, that there is a case when you deal with Michael Cohen, Stormy Daniels, and the rest, and that's on one side, and that the Mueller investigation is a separate case, and yet people continue to conflate them. I'll have you just explain that to us as we try to close it out here.
Sure. I think we don't know necessarily what we don't know in all the evidence, but based on the public reporting, it seems like the case involving Michael Cohen has come as a referral from the special counsel's office to the federal prosecutors in Manhattan and relates to separate conduct apart from the underlying allegations in the Mueller investigation.
All right, Rohan Virgin-Carr, I appreciate you being here today. Karl Rove, I think you're in Austin, and General Jack Keane here in New York. Thanks for joining us on this busy day. I'm Dana Perino. Next up, you know it, Shep Smith.